Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Dean. I think that the two of you must have got together and worked out on some of this, and roads and paths and fearless and courage. And I'm wondering, does Dean think we're all a bunch of characters? Yeah, and where has he placed you? You know, I'm trying to think that, you know, I'm somewhere probably in his mind between the Flim Flam Man and Oz. So I'm not sure just how that's working out. But yeah. And I really have no way to follow storytelling in that way. It's kind of like, wow, The Wizard of Oz. I didn't get that in the reading at all. I went someplace totally different from that. So, you know, I used to think it was strange to be in my mind, but Dean, yeah. So the topic was, the reading, the meditation today was that when love enters, fear vanishes. And I've been doing a lot of reading in this last month, not in storybook kind of things, but more in the science aspect of what's going on. And if you recall, those that were here last month in the August issue of the Science of Mind magazine, we have an article that actually they show up every month. It's a couple of individuals that are scientists, and they're neuroscientists, and they work with the brain and all of this kind of technical aspect. And I believe that our founder, Ernest Holmes, when he started this movement and called it the Science of Mind, when he wrote the textbook of Science of Mind, he had an idea that science was that new evolution, that new movement that was coming into the world, that was explaining a lot of what philosophy and religions have been talking about for eons of time. And that now we are in this place of intelligence, of brain power, of knowledge, where we're beginning to move into the study of these things to try to better understand how it is that life is really coming about. And it's not something that we necessarily have to follow anymore because some prophet told us that this was the way it was going to be, or there was some set of articles that you had to follow, or you know, something, some icon that you needed to worship to in order to get to that place of bliss, or to return home to Kansas, or whatever it was for you, but that it was already there within. And the science of today, the quantum theory, is beginning to prove all of these things. So in the 1920s, Ernest Holmes was really a man ahead of his time when he began to pull all of this together. And he said, you know, the science of mind is a correlation. It's this coming together. It's finding where these things integrate between science and philosophy and religion, and it puts it out in a way that can be used in the everyday practical way of living your life. That's what we are about. That's what religious science is about. That's what Science of Mind is about. It's about taking this, you know, the best that you can find in science, the best that you can find in philosophy, and the best that you can find in religion and tradition and culture and storybooks and metaphors, and bringing that together and making some practical sense about it that you can use in your life, that you can bring forth so that you can have a greater experience, that you can have all of those qualities that you so desire, that you know are just urging to come out of you. That idea about abundance and balance, beauty and joy and freedom and love and wisdom and truth and unity and wholeness. These values that inherently we know are a part of who we are. It is the nature of who and what we are made of. And so here we are now, almost 100 years into this movement of the science of mind, and something has shifted for us, and we've renamed our movement, and we now call it the Center for Spiritual Living. And there was like 50 years that we couldn't come together in agreement, and so a whole group of us, went off in one direction and said, this is the science of mind, this is religious science, and we're going to call it United. And then another whole group went off and said, this is science of mind, this is religious science, and we're going to call it International. And yet it was all one and the same. And then here we are a year ago, we came back together and said, it's just one. We don't need to fool ourselves. We don't need to create some kind of false evidence that there's duality in the world or in the idea of life. It's all one. Looks different, feels different. Thank Spirit, thank God for that. How boring it would be if we were all the same. Don't you like the idea that we're not all the same? That we have our differences, we have our preferences, we have our uniqueness that makes us special. Each and every one of us is special. And that doesn't take away anything from anybody else, because everybody's special. Don't you love that? You're all special. You should be excited about that. You're special. You're unique. You are an individualized expression of Spirit. So in this changing and renaming, and the teaching's still the same. We're still using the same books. We're still pretty much teaching the class the way that it was taught to me some 20 years ago when I entered onto this journey. But there's something that has changed. There's a shift that has happened. And just in the very idea of changing our name created a shift. The Centers for Spiritual Living. So it used to be when I was introduced into this philosophy, and I was really taking it to heart, and I was trying to transform my life, and I learned this idea that, so this is religious science, and so therefore I am a religious scientist. And I was proud to stand up and say, I'm a religious scientist. And I would go out into the community, out into the world out there, and it would be fascinating. As people, would ask you, it's like, so, who are you? Or some question like that. And I'd say, I'm a religious scientist. And they go, yes, you are. And kind of like start to walk away, and so I tried to soften that, because I grew up in a small town in Iowa near Dorothy, and a very strong Irish Catholic family. So, so for a while, my story was, well, I'm a recovering Catholic. That's how I would introduce myself. And that was a little easier for some people, because then they kind of had a way to relate. But now I have this whole new framework that I work with. So now people say, well, who are you, or what do you do? And I say, I'm a center for spiritual living. That's who I am. I'm a center right here in this physical being. I am a center for spiritual living. And people find that interesting. They're like, well, what does that mean?